the American West. It wasn't just a place on a map, it was a state of mind. A sprawling, untamed canvas of dust and dreams, where civilization's edge frayed into wilderness. It was a land of staggering beauty and unforgiving brutality, a place where a man's character was forged in the heat of a desert sun and tested by the cold steel of a Colt revolver. The era of the true Wild West was fleeting, a few short decades between the Civil War and the turn of the 20th century. But its echo is eternal. From the crucible of this violent, vibrant period, legends were born. Not just stories, but archetypes. Lawmen who were faster than a blink, outlaws who were ghosts on the plains, and performers whose skills seemed to defy reality. These figures were larger than life in their own time, and in death, they've become something more. Their tales have seeped into the soil, been carried on the prairie winds, and gallop through the heart of the American identity. They are specters of freedom and justice, of rebellion and survival. These are the legends that still ride through the Wild West, brought to life. Our ride begins on the dusty streets of a town whose name became a synonym for frontier justice, Tombstone, Arizona. Here, the legend of a man with a steady hand and an unyielding will was etched into history. His name was Wyatt Earp. A former buffalo hunter, lawman, and gambler, Earp arrived in the silver mining boomtown in 1879 with his brothers, seeking fortune. Instead, they found trouble in the form of a loose-knit gang of outlaws known as the Cowboys. Tensions simmered, then boiled over on October 26, 1881. In a narrow lot behind the OK Corral, Wyatt, his brothers Virgil and Morgan, and their friend Doc Holliday confronted the Clanton and McClory brothers. In 30 seconds, 30 shots were fired. When the gun smoke cleared, 3 cowboys were dead. The gunfight at the OK Corral wasn't the end. It was the beginning of Earp's legend. The cowboys retaliated, ambushing Virgil and assassinating Morgan. This unleashed a different Wyatt Earp, not a lawman, but an avenger. He embarked on a vendetta ride, hunting down and killing the men responsible, a grim campaign of extra-legal justice. Earp lived to an old age, dying in 1929, but his spirit remains forever in Tombstone. He represents the complex duality of the West, the thin line between law and vengeance, the necessity of a hard man in a hard land. Today, his legend rides through every Western film that features a stoic hero facing down impossible odds. He is the blueprint for the frontier lawman, a figure whose iconic stand in the Arizona dust continues to define our vision of order in a world of chaos. While Wyatt Earp represented the law, another figure, born Henry McCarty, became the embodiment of youthful rebellion and outlaw charisma. We know him as Billy the Kid. His legend is a whirlwind of violence and myth, a short, brutal life that became immortal. Arriving in the New Mexico Territory as a teenager, he fell into the bloody Lincoln County War, a conflict between rival merchant factions. Fighting for the regulators, Billy proved to be a deadly gunman and a fearless fighter. But when the war ended, he was a wanted man. His most famous feat was his escape from the Lincoln County Courthouse in April 1881. Sentenced to hang, shackled and guarded, the Kid somehow found a hidden pistol, shot both his guards, and rode out of town, singing. The act cemented his status as a folk hero, a boy who could outwit and outfight any authority. But his freedom was short-lived. Just a few months later, on July 14, 1881, Sheriff Pat Garrett tracked him to Fort Sumner. In a dark room, Garrett's pistol flashed, and Billy the Kid fell dead at just 21 years old. Yet, his legend refused to die. Was it really him? For decades, men came forward claiming to be the real Billy the Kid, feeding the myth that he had somehow escaped again. Today, Billy the Kid rides on as the ultimate symbol of the romantic outlaw. He is the spirit of defiance, the handsome, smiling killer who lived fast and died young. His grave in Fort Sumner is a major tourist attraction, a shrine to a boy who became a myth, his ghost forever riding free across the New Mexico plains he knew so well, always one step ahead of the law. The West was not just a world of men. On the raw frontier, some women carved out legends just as potent, and none were more rugged or enigmatic than Martha Jane Canary, better known as Calamity Jane. A force of nature from the Black Hills of Dakota, Calamity Jane was a frontierswoman, a professional scout, and an alcoholic raconteur who shattered every Victorian ideal of femininity. She dressed in buckskins, swore like a sailor, and was as skilled with a rifle and a horse as any man. Her legend is a tangled mess of fact and fiction, much of it spun by Jane herself. She claimed to have been a scout for General Custer, a Pony Express rider, and a capturer of notorious outlaws. Most famously, she was a companion of the legendary gunman Wild Bill Hickok. Their association in Deadwood, South Dakota in 1876 became the cornerstone of her myth. When Hickok was murdered, Jane's grief was public and profound, fueling tales of a deep romance that likely never existed. But beyond the tall tales was a woman of documented courage and compassion. During a smallpox outbreak in Deadwood, she nursed the sick when others fled, showing a tenderness that contrasted sharply with her rough exterior. Calamity Jane lived a hard life and died in 1903, requesting to be buried next to Wild Bill. Today, her legend rides as a symbol of female independence and untamable spirit. She represents the grit and resilience required to survive on the frontier, a woman who lived by her own rules and created her own story. She is the patron saint of the unconventional, a ghost in buckskins who proves that the spirit of the Wild West belonged to women as much as it did to men. While Calamity Jane's fame was regional, another outlaw's name struck fear and admiration across the entire nation. He was the most famous bank and train robber in American history, Jesse James. Born in Missouri, Jesse and his brother Frank were Confederate guerrillas during the Civil War, riding with bloody outfits that practiced brutal hit-and-run warfare. After the war, they refused to accept defeat, turning their wartime skills to crime. The James Younger Gang robbed banks, trains, and stagecoaches across the Midwest, becoming notorious for their daring and violent raids. But to many Southerners, who felt oppressed by Reconstruction, Jesse James was not a common criminal. He was a hero. Newspapers, particularly the supportive Kansas City Times editor John Newman Edwards, crafted a narrative of Jesse as an American Robin Hood, a modern cavalier fighting a corrupt system. They claimed he stole from the rich, greedy railroad barons and Yankee bankers and gave to the poor. While there is little evidence he ever shared his loot, the myth was incredibly powerful. It transformed him from a ruthless killer into a symbol of Confederate defiance. The legend came to a pathetic end on April 3, 1882. Hiding in St. Joseph, Missouri, under an alias, Jesse was shot in the back of the head by a new gang member, Robert Ford, who sought the bounty money. The dirty little coward had killed Mr. Howard. Jesse James's death only amplified his legend. He became a martyr, his story immortalized in dime novels, ballads, and films. Today, he rides on as a complex American icon, a figure who embodies the lingering bitterness of the Civil War and the romantic appeal of the outlaw who stands against power. He is a ghost of rebellion, forever caught between the image of a folk hero and the reality of a cold-blooded killer. As outlaws and lawmen fought over the spoils of the West, a far more profound struggle was taking place, a battle for the land itself. No figure embodies the spirit of Native American resistance more fiercely than the Apache warrior Geronimo. He was not a chief, but a medicine man and a war leader of the Baden-Kohei Band. His crusade was born from a deep personal tragedy. In 1858, while he was away on a trading trip, Mexican soldiers massacred his wife, his mother, and his 3 young children. From that day forward, Geronimo lived for vengeance. For nearly 30 years, he led a small band of warriors in raids against both Mexican and American forces across Arizona, New Mexico, and northern Mexico. He became a master of guerrilla warfare, his name a source of terror for settlers and soldiers. He seemed to be a phantom, able to vanish into the harsh terrain of the Sierra Madre Mountains, striking without warning and disappearing without a trace. They said he could walk without leaving tracks, and that he could see the future. The U.S. Army threw thousands of soldiers, a quarter of its entire force, into the campaign to capture him and his handful of followers. He surrendered 3 times, only to escape the reservation and return to the warpath. His final surrender in 1886 in Skeleton Canyon, Arizona, marked the symbolic end of the Indian Wars. Geronimo spent the rest of his life as a prisoner of war, becoming a strange sort of celebrity, appearing at world's fairs and in presidential parades. He died in 1909, still a prisoner, his last regret that he had ever surrendered. Today, Geronimo's spirit rides as the ultimate symbol of untamable defiance and the fight for one's homeland. His name is still invoked as a battle cry, a testament to the warrior who refused to be broken. His legend, a powerful and painful reminder of the true cost of westward expansion. Not all Western legends were forged in violence. Some were created on the stage, under the bright lights of the Wild West shows that brought a sanitized version of the frontier to the world. And no star shone brighter than Annie Oakley. Born Phoebe Ann Moses in rural Ohio, she developed an almost supernatural skill with a rifle out of necessity, hunting game to support her impoverished family. By her teenage years, she was a professional sharpshooter, paying off the family farm's mortgage with her winnings. Her life changed when she defeated famed marksman Frank E. Butler in a shooting contest. He was smitten, and they soon married, forming a performing partnership. In 1885, they joined Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, and Annie Oakley became an international superstar. Billed as Little Sure Shot, the petite, 5-foot-tall woman astounded audiences with her incredible feats. She could shoot a playing card in half from the side, snuff out a candle flame with a bullet, and shoot a dime tossed in the air. She famously shot the ash off a cigarette held in her husband's mouth. But Annie Oakley was more than a performer. She was a trailblazer. In an era of outlaws and saloon girls, she presented a different image of a Western woman. Poised, professional, and supremely competent. She was a staunch advocate for women, believing they should learn to use a gun for self-defense, and she personally taught thousands of women how to shoot. She challenged gender roles without ever sacrificing her own sense of propriety. Today, Annie Oakley's legend rides on as a symbol of female empowerment and extraordinary talent. She represents the idea that skill, not gender, is what truly matters. She proved that you could be a lady and still be the best shot in the world. Her legacy not one of gunfights in dusty streets, but of stunning artistry that brought the spirit of the West to life for millions. As the 19th century drew to a close, the era of the lone outlaw was fading, replaced by organized gangs who hit hard and vanished. The most famous of these were the Wild Bunch, led by 2 of the most charismatic criminals in American history, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Butch, born Robert Leroy Parker, was the brains of the operation. Charming, clever, and known for his aversion to killing. The Sundance Kid, Harry Longabaugh, was the opposite, a quiet, deadly fast gun. Together with their gang, they executed a string of daring bank and train robberies across Wyoming, Colorado, and Utah, creating a network of hideouts known as the Outlaw Trail. They were innovative, using dynamite to blow open safes and having fresh horses waiting in relays for their escapes. Their most famous period of activity was from 1896 to 1901, a time when they were relentlessly pursued by the Pinkerton Detective Agency. As the law closed in, Butch and Sundance, along with Sundance's companion Etta Place, made a bold move. They fled to Argentina, hoping to live out their days as respectable ranchers, but their past followed them. After a few years of peace, they were recognized and returned to a life of crime, robbing banks in South America. The end of their legend is shrouded in mystery. In 1908, in the small Bolivian town of San Vicente, 2 American bandits were cornered by soldiers after a payroll robbery. A shootout ensued, and when the soldiers entered the building the next morning, they found both men dead. One apparently having mercy killed his wounded partner before taking his own life. Were they Butch and Sundance? Most historians believe so, but the lack of definitive proof has fueled a legend of their survival. For decades, people claimed to have seen them back in the United States, living quiet lives under new names. This mystery is why their legend still rides so powerfully. They represent the end of an era, the last of the great romantic outlaws who tried to outrun civilization itself and for a time nearly succeeded. While white outlaws and lawmen became national celebrities, the story of one of the greatest lawmen in American history was largely forgotten, simply because he was black. His name was Bass Reeves. Born into slavery in Arkansas in 1838, Reeves escaped during the Civil War and lived among the Creek and Seminole tribes in Indian Territory, learning their languages and mastering the art of tracking. After the war, he was a free man. In 1875, when the legendary hanging judge Isaac Parker was appointed to tame the lawless Indian Territory, a 75,000 square mile area, he needed the best men he could find. He commissioned Bass Reeves as one of the first black deputy U.S. Marshals west of the Mississippi. For 32 years, Reeves was a force of unwavering justice in the most dangerous territory in the country. He was a towering figure, over 6 feet tall, an expert marksman with both a pistol and a rifle, and a master of disguise. He brought in over 3,000 outlaws, some of the most desperate criminals of the era. He killed 14 men in the line of duty, always claiming he did so in self-defense. His most famous and heart-wrenching case involved his own son, who was charged with murder. Despite his personal pain, Reeves accepted the warrant, tracked his son down, and brought him in to face justice. He was a man of absolute, incorruptible integrity. Yet, for nearly a century, his story was erased from the popular narrative of the West. Today, Bass Reeves's legend is finally riding out of the shadows. Historians now recognize him as one of the most effective lawmen of the era, and many believe he was a primary inspiration for the fictional character of the Lone Ranger. His story is a powerful testament to courage and duty in the face of overwhelming prejudice. A true American hero whose legacy of justice is finally getting the recognition it deserves. Not all legends of the West are about people. Some are pure, terrifying folklore, phantoms born from violent deeds and whispered around campfires. In the arid brush country of South Texas, cowhands tell the tale of El Muerto, the headless horseman. The story is rooted in a real, gruesome event from the 1850s. A notorious horse thief named Vidal was rustling cattle from a rancher named Creed Taylor. Taylor and his men hunted Vidal down, but instead of simply killing him, they decided to make a truly horrific example of him. They decapitated him, and then, in a stroke of macabre frontier ingenuity, they strapped his body upright into a saddle on the back of a wild Mustang. They lashed his severed head, with its eyes wide in a final scream, to the saddle horn and set the horse loose to wander the plains. For days, the terrified horse galloped across the landscape, a grisly messenger of frontier justice. Cowboys and settlers would see the headless rider silhouetted against the sunset, a sight so horrifying it was believed to be a demon from hell. The horse was eventually captured and the body of Vidal was buried, but his ghost was just getting started. For decades after, and even into the modern era, people in South Texas have reported seeing a lone rider on the horizon, a headless figure on a dark horse, galloping silently through the mesquite. He is most often seen during a full moon near the area where he was killed. Is it a trick of the light? A local myth that refuses to die? Or is the tormented spirit of the horse thief Vidal still riding, forever bound to his gruesome fate? El Muerto is a legend that represents the sheer brutality of the untamed West, a time when justice was swift, personal, and often terrifyingly creative. He is a pure specter of the frontier, a chilling ghost story that still haunts the Texas plains. As the West was being tamed by lawmen and settled by pioneers, it was also being conquered by industry. The greatest symbol of this conquest was the railroad, and its expansion gave birth to one of America's most powerful folk heroes, John Henry. While many legends are born of gunslingers, John Henry was a legend of muscle and steel. He was a steel-driving man, an African-American ex-slave who worked on the construction of the Chesapeake and Ohio Railway's Big Bend Tunnel in West Virginia in the early 1870s. His job was to hammer a steel drill into rock to create holes for explosives. He was said to be the strongest and fastest steel driver on the line. The legend crystallizes at a single, epic moment: the race against the machine. The railroad company brought in a new steam-powered drill, threatening to replace the manual laborers. John Henry, in a heroic act of defiance, made a wager that he could beat the machine. With a 12-pound hammer in each hand, he drilled for an entire day. The contest was titanic, the rhythmic, thunderous clang of his hammers against steel versus the relentless chugging and hissing of the steam drill. In the end, John Henry won. He had drilled 2 7-foot holes, while the steam drill had only managed 1 9-foot hole. But the victory came at a terrible price. Having pushed his body beyond its limits, John Henry collapsed, his heart giving out, and died with his hammer in his hand. Whether this contest happened exactly as the ballad says is debated by historians, but the core truth is undeniable. Men like John Henry did this back-breaking work, and their humanity was being challenged by the dawn of the machine age. Today, the legend of John Henry rides as a powerful American allegory. He is a symbol of the working man, of human spirit against overwhelming technological force, and of the dignity of labor. His story, immortalized in one of the most famous folk songs in American history, ensures that the man who beat the machine will never be replaced or forgotten. Before the railroad and the telegraph connected the nation, the West was a place of vast distances and profound isolation. For a brief, glorious period, the lifeline of communication was carried on the backs of brave young men on fast horses. This was the legend of the Pony Express. Operating for only 19 months from April 1860 to October 1861, the Pony Express became an enduring symbol of Western grit. The concept was simple. A chain of riders would carry mail in a relay from St. Joseph, Missouri, to Sacramento, California, a distance of nearly 2,000 miles, in a record 10 days. The company's advertisements called for young, skinny, wiry fellows, not over 18, must be expert riders, willing to risk death daily. Orphans preferred. The riders were exactly that. They rode at a full gallop, changing horses at relay stations every 10 to 15 miles. They faced blizzards, desert heat, and the constant threat of attack. One of the most famous riders was a young William F. Cody, who would later become the showman Buffalo Bill. At just 15, he once completed a ride of 322 miles when his relief rider was unavailable, a feat of endurance that became legendary. The Pony Express was a financial failure, made obsolete almost overnight by the completion of the transcontinental telegraph, but its legacy was immense. It wasn't about one man, but about a system of courage. The image of a lone rider pushing his horse across the plains with the mail pouch, or mochila, became an icon. The Pony Express rider still rides today as the embodiment of speed, youth, and dedication. He represents a fleeting moment of pure human endeavor, a romantic symbol of the pre-industrial West when the fastest thing on the continent was a man on a horse, racing against time itself. Our journey through the legends of the West must end where the story of the free, nomadic West truly concluded, with the Lakota holy man and chief whose vision and leadership defined the last stand of the Plains Indians. His name was Tatanka Iyotake, known to the world as Sitting Bull. He was not just a warrior, but a spiritual leader, a Hunkpapa Lakota, whose wisdom and steadfastness made him the central figure of resistance against U.S. government encroachment. His fame was cemented in 1876 when he had a powerful vision of soldiers falling upside down into his camp. Just days later, his vision came true at the Battle of the Little Bighorn, where he led the coalition of tribes that decisively defeated Lieutenant Colonel George Custer's 7th Cavalry. This victory, however, only intensified the government's resolve to crush the Sioux. Sitting Bull led his people to Canada for several years, but was eventually forced by starvation to surrender in 1881. He later toured with Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, a living symbol of a defeated people, before settling on the Standing Rock Reservation. In 1890, the Ghost Dance movement, a spiritual revival that promised the return of the buffalo and the disappearance of the white man, swept the reservations. Fearing Sitting Bull would use his influence to lead an uprising, agency police were sent to arrest him. In the pre-dawn darkness of December 15th, a scuffle broke out, and the great chief was shot and killed. His death was a prelude to the Wounded Knee Massacre 2 weeks later. Today, Sitting Bull's spirit rides as a figure of immense moral authority and tragic dignity. He represents the heart of a people and a way of life that was systematically destroyed. He is not a legend of outlaws or adventure, but a profound and somber legend of cultural endurance and the ultimate price of a nation's expansion. His legacy is a vital, haunting reminder of the West that was lost. If you enjoyed this ride through the legends of the Wild West, please give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the stories that shaped history. We'll see you in the next one.